Sitecore Experienced, Episode 2A, recorded March 28th and March 29th, 2015.
Welcome to Sitecore Experience.
Sitecore Experienced, a video podcast to showcase information related to Sitecore for the benefit of the Sitecore community.
So, welcome to Sitecore Experienced Episode 2A. As we mentioned in Episode 2, Mike Reynolds brought us so much content that we had to split it up. We realized that you guys have busy schedules and can't sit through, an hour and a half presentation. But the content was really great. We wanted to make sure we delivered it out to you. We wanted to do Mike justice because it is a great presentation. So here is the final 3 design patterns he talked about. There's some questions and answers from him, questions from us, answers from him, of course, during these 3 patterns, and we hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in. If you missed Episode 2, please watch that because that has Mike's intro to what he's talking about and why he's talking about it. Thank you, guys.
All right, let's talk about the template method pattern. So basically, this is a pattern where you define the main quote-unquote algorithm in an abstract base class. So you'll have an abstract base class that has the meat and potatoes of an algorithm that you want to perform. But you kind of it's like a fill-in-the-blanks type of thing where some of the core stuff that needs to happen within that algorithm are, they're pretty much the subclasses need to implement them. And those are done through, abstract methods. Those, the abstract methods would be defined on the base class, and then the subclasses need to, quote-unquote, fill in the blanks. The template method pattern also, promotes having hooks in your classes. So that would be like a virtual method that the subclasses can override, where the parent class might define how they work. But, it pretty much gives the ability to change the algorithm even more. There's a lot of stuff actually in Sitecore.kernel that does this as well. Can't think of anything off the top of my head, but it does exist. If I figure it out, I'll let you know. So this is pretty much the UML diagram for the template method pattern. You have your abstract class here, or base class, I should say. And this A means they're abstract, so basically subclasses need to implement these guys. I'm not sure what this F means, but I'm assuming that's part of the main algorithm. Maybe that's a hook, I'm not sure. Then you have, your do something method here. And it looks like the author of this UML diagram decided to, kind of like make these more clear here. I'm not really sure what value this adds. But you have a concrete subclass that implements, this guy and basically does implement the abstract methods here. I'm not really sure why do something's over here as well, because it looks like this would be something that's in the main algorithm here, but not sure. But anyways, let's have a look at an example of this. All right, so this is all about item validation. Actually, this is about, sorry, totally off. This is about content editor warnings in Sitecore. Basically, the content editor warnings show up inside of Sitecore, as I would say up here, as a yellow area that shows up saying, alerting the content author whether there's a problem with your content within your item. Here's an example. So we have 2 content editor warnings here. It's alerting the content author that something's wrong and they need to take action or something to fix it. I have 2 of these out of the that I've created within this pattern for 2 different content editor warnings here. Pretty much this item has too many sub items, you can see there are 25 sub-items underneath this guy, so it's telling the content author they need to convert this to an item bucket to fix that problem. I totally chose 25 or 20 as just an arbitrary number. In reality, you don't want to exceed more than 100 items underneath a content item or folder in Sitecore because there could be performance impacts for doing that. And then I came up with this totally facetious thing about having invalid characters inside of an item name, hyphen $1. I just chose that at random. Nothing really crazy, but so let's have a look at that. Let's look at the configuration file. So it's a lot more complicated than what we've seen so far. We have, just having a look here real quickly. So we have content editor warnings here. This is the pipeline that we're hooking into here. We have something for too many child items. And then we have something else for has invalid character names. So we're actually injecting two different pipeline processors here. For the too many child items, I'm injecting things using Sitecore configuration to put things inside of the class that I have defined here. I created this whole little framework around warnings. Title of the warning, the message you want to show to the end user, and then some actions they can take on fixing the problems. I called it links. So pretty much this is a share UI link that shows up in the content editor warning, which is this link right here, and that link as well. So let's jump into code. Code is great. So for the too many child items warning, we take in the number of child items that we want to compare against. So I think in configuration I chose 20 randomly or something like that. Here it is, 20. So that gets injected into that property on that class. And then we're also injecting the warning that should get displayed. Sorry, let's take a look at that again. So warning, it's this guy right here. We're using this instance, an instance of a class defined here, around the messaging and title and things like that, and then the actions to take. Let's jump back here real quickly. I know I'm running out of, I probably am going in the wrong order here. I probably should have shown warning first. Let's take a look at that actually real quickly. So I defined something called iWarning. It's an interface that takes in a title message and then links to take action to fix things. And then I determine whether, it has content or not. And then I have this clone method here because this actually isn't used in this pattern that I'm showing. It's actually used in the next pattern, but I have that here because I'm reusing these classes across the two different patterns. So here's the actual concrete class for the iWarning. Just defining the properties that we have here, the links to take action, creating a new collection of links to do things, just so things don't blow up if anything's null. It has content when we have a title, and it looks like I have a problem here, code problem. So because these two guys right here are the same thing. So really in reality you just want one. And then we check to see if there's a message. If it doesn't have content, we don't take action on it. And then clone just creates a new instance of the warning class and returns it. That's all that does. It's not used in this pattern. And then we have our command link, text, and then the command to run. So this is a share UI command that you have that defined in Sitecore configuration. So this is the link text, and this is what to do when the user clicks on that link. Jumping back to too many child items. We have our get warnings method here, which is actually I think it's a hook defined in this guy, or it could be an abstract class, I don't remember. So if this is an abstract class, this is a nice example of the template method pattern out of the box in Sitecore. But I'm kind of leveraging that for my own little API here. I make sure things are defined, in configuration like they should be in this assert method. And then I basically go, I determine whether the item that we're looking at has too many child items, which is 20 in this example, If it's less than 20, less than or equal to, we return just an empty warning list. Otherwise, we return the warning that's in configuration. And then that gets injected into this class here for the content editor warnings pipeline processor. So we basically get the warnings that are defined for this item on the actual warnings that we have defined here. I have two, and I know I just showed one. I'll show the other one in a second. If there are no warnings, we just return. Otherwise, we actually go through all the warnings and we add them, to, the warnings collection that's defined inside of this arguments object. If it doesn't have content, we return because, there's nothing to show, right? Otherwise, we basically add it to the args here. I also have I put in a hook for translate text that uses the translation framework in Sitecore. This is in the globalization namespace of the Sitecore kernel. This will give you the ability to have different content languages for the warning if you'd like. You could have that defined somewhere. I just put that in here as a nice to have. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, but it's a hook because it's virtual. So then we just add the title of it, and then we add the actual text if it's defined. We also do translation on that as well. If there are any links associated with the warning, we add them here to the actual warnings that's defined on the arguments. Otherwise, we just get out. So let me jump over to the has invalid characters warnings class I defined. So, I'm injecting the separators, for the characters. Let me take a look at that real quickly. So this is actually for this guy right here. And we have our separator defined here as well. I don't encode this because this is XML, and XML doesn't like to have ampersand, so that's why I encoded it. Magically, it gets encoded into what we need. So basically, I'm just looking at a space here. The character, I guess the separator should be a space. This is all around actually formatting the message that you see just defined here. Put a space here, blah, 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 whatever. And then I'm injecting the warning like we did in the other warning, which is up here. And then we have our command. So, not to jump back, but I'm going to. The command to take action for share is to create a bucket for if it has too many child items. The command down here is to rename it. So the content author will get an alert box, well actually really a text box in a modal to rename the item to take action. So these are the invalid characters that we have defined on the item name, and then some messaging. So let's go back here. I know I'm jumping around, I'm sorry. Let's actually see it in action. That will probably give you a better thing. So we have I put $-1 inside of the name of this item here. He's got an interesting cat image on it, but we don't care about that. It's all around the item name and too many children here, so there are 25 here, and we define 20 to be too many, or to be the endpoint. So these show up here in a nice way, and these are the command links that show up. So here, we did item bucket to give the content author the ability to make this a bucket item. Let's click it and see what happens. Sure, I'm sure.
It may take a few minutes.
It might.
No, it's a good example because it just showing kind of that real life interface that an author needs to go through.
Right.
And it's perfect.
And I'm not building anything magical here. This is like stock Sitecore functionality around bucketing. And then what I'm going to show it renaming is the same thing. I'm not building anything brand new. I'm just leveraging what's there. So as you can see, this got converted into an item bucket. Just to break it up, to make it more manageable, I suppose. So if we go back here, now we have this search component on here because it's an item bucket that's built into Sitecore. If we go back to content, we have another content editor warning. We have invalid character names inside of the item name. If I click rename, well, it gives me a nice modal to rename the item. So let's get rid of 2 of them and leave the other invalid name and see what happens. Oh, I still have a problem. It contains 1, so let's rename it again. Boom. No more content edited warnings because we actually conform to the rules that are in, I guess, the framework that I have laid out here. So there we go. That's the template method pattern in a nutshell. This uses inheritance. In the next pattern that I'm about to show, really the Gang of 4 and a lot of people out there in the design patterns community will say composition over inheritance. So this uses inheritance, which is, it's a nice way to do things quickly. You inherit from something, you override, abstract methods. But problem with that is you're kind of tightly coupling your subclasses with your abstract base class, and that's, not really, I would say, what you want to do necessarily, because you kind of want to make things loosely coupled. So like if, let's say you make a change to the abstract base class that will impact the subclasses, well, you have to go and rewrite all the subclasses to conform to that change. And that can actually be a nightmare if, like, you have these subclasses defined in multiple DLLs and you can't change things. And so in the next pattern, I'll show you, a little paradigm to go around that. The unfortunate thing is it adds complication. And, well, we'll talk about that during the next one. Strategy pattern. So what does that mean? I mean, people use the word strategy out there for business and blah, blah, blah. But we're not talking about business. We're talking about code. We're talking about software engineering here. So pretty much, according to what I read, it defines a family of classes with the same interface, right? So what that means is we're defining a family of classes that adhere to the same interface to do things. One class will encapsulate these guys, right? And then each one of these guys can be interchangeable, through that class that encapsulates them. And then I just laugh at this and I'm like, yeah, no kidding, because they have the same interface. Of course they're interchangeable. Not really sure why the authors of, I think this came from the Gang of 4. Not sure why they defined that, but just thinking back to the context of 1994, they were thinking in C++ terms. Reality is, there was no real interfaces back then as we know them in .NET. You would have to create basically a parent class that would have nothing defined in it. I think that's the reason for it, but really, today it's like some of the wording is a little deprecated. But anyways, of course they're interchangeable. They have the same interface. Go to the next slide. So this is a nice, interesting looking UML diagram with colors. I definitely give credits to the people I ripped this off of, but hopefully they don't come after me. I don't know if this is copyrighted, but whatever. So here we go. We have a strategy interface, and it defines a public execute method. Really, this is not needed. You can define it to be whatever you want. Then you have some concrete strategies defined to do things. Then you have a context object. So what this does is this uses this to do things. Now, the way I built the example I'm about to show is definitely different than this. I don't know how my stuff adheres to this, but I'm basing it off of how I understand the strategy pattern from what I've read, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but anyways, I digress a bit, so let's actually have a look at what I've done. Before I jump into it, this is something that, I forget where I've read this, but at least I know this from doing this multiple times when implementing this pattern. The strategy pattern is an alternative to the template method pattern. The difference is, in strategy pattern, you're not using inheritance, you're using composition. So as I mentioned before, composition, should be, favored over inheritance, so that you can loosely couple your classes that, work with each other. So that's what it is. However, the caveat is the strategy pattern adds a lot of complication, as you'll see in a second, because it makes things a lot more difficult to understand, because you're doing a lot of delegation and there's a lot more code. So let's take a look at that. All right, strategy pattern. So we're doing the same thing that we did with the template method pattern, We're reusing the same warning stuff that I showed before. And the difference here is that, for the too many child items, sorry, I think I skipped over that. We define a family of quote unquote algorithms. Really, that's what you'll see out in Wikipedia or in the Gang of Four book. It's like, oh, you're defining a family of algorithms. Really, we're defining a family of classes that adhere to the same interface. So I defined something called iWarnings generator. I probably should jump to that because that actually would make sense. So basically, we have an item property for these guys, and then we do a generate, which returns an iWarning, as you've seen the iWarning during the last pattern. Nothing crazy here.
No.
All right, let's go to the actual generators that I made. So, too many child items implements that interface we looked at. I'm injecting the maximum amount of child items in this class like we did during the template method pattern. We're injecting a warning. And then this guy, we have a public item property to pass an item to do things on. We do some asserts on things to make sure things are actually lined up the way we need them in order to run the generate method. So, item is required. Make sure we have content on our warning. Make sure the max number of child items is defined. Just like we looked at the last time, we're just doing the same type of stuff. I actually ripped this code out of the last pattern to build this. If we have 20 or less items, based off of configuration, which I didn't show because I'm deviating from what I showed before, we return an empty collection. Otherwise, we return the warning, as we have defined. So if we go to the other one about has invalid character names, we have a lot more stuff defined here, just like in the last pattern. We're injecting things in, via Sitecore configuration factory like we did before. Nothing crazy. We're just encapsulating this into another object instead of doing it inside of the get content editor warnings processor. Here we're doing the same generation stuff. I'm using a hash set here to make sure things are actually in this collection that are unique. That's what this gives you. I've been using this a lot because, well, I hate having the same type of thing defined inside of a collection. So this guarantees that things are actually unique. And that's all around the characters that are invalid when they get injected. We iterate over that. We add it to the collection. If there aren't any, we get out of here because, well, there's no point in looking at the item name if we don't have anything that's defined as invalid. I get a little peek around the clone thing that, I talked about.
Yep.
I'm using it here. So pretty much the reason why I'm using it here is because I probably should have showed this, but I didn't. I think I put a token in here. And it's all around that. I want to reuse this guy, this warning class, across all instances of this particular warning. But I want, it needs to work across, different, I guess, context here. Because if, I want to give the ability to inject this in nice real time so that people can change this warning message if they need to be changed. We're just having a token set here. That's why I'm doing clone.
Okay.
So we don't return something that has this in it, this token. And this is not using, the master variables replacer stuff. I defined this for this class. So let's jump to that real quickly. So let's step through where we were. I'm sorry for jumping around, but that's my style. So if we find any, well, we have our separator stuff going on here. If we find anything, we basically we do our token replacement on the message that's defined in configuration, and then we'll return the actual warning that we have cloned. That's what this guy's cloned up here.
Okay.
And then here, looks like I had to do some crazy string manipulation in this class. It really, I think it had to depend on where things are defined. I don't really remember why I did it like this, but I mean, so that's not the gist of this. The gist is, we're using composition here over inheritance for these different types of generators. If we go to the content editor warnings pipeline processor that we have defined, we're getting the warnings like we did before. If there aren't any, we get out. Otherwise, we iterate over them and add them to the actual arguments object to the pipeline processor. If the warning doesn't have any content, we just get out. Otherwise, we don't add it here. Otherwise, we add it to it with, the different, things that need to show up in the content editor warning. So title, messaging, and then the different command links that we have. Using the same translation stuff that we had before. Nothing special here. But one of the weird things here is that I had to define something called the context. So that's another abstraction for this. Pretty much, in a way, you can actually think about this as an adapter of the generators that we defined. So this guy takes in the generator, and then he takes in, an item for that we're doing a look at. And then really it's just delegating. It's setting the item on the generator, and then it's basically generating the actual warning. So that's where that context stuff comes into play that I showed in the PowerPoint slide here. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, I think this adds complexity that you don't need, but I just did this to be in the pure spirit of this pattern. I think this is totally overkill in my opinion, but it's just another level of abstraction. So we go back here. I'm trying to remember where I actually used this class. I know it's in here somewhere. Sorry for the crazy Skype messages.
People will enjoy reading those, though.
I'd close Skype, but we're using Skype here.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. So this is where the context is used. We're basically passing the generator that's being injected through Sitecore Configuration Factory. We're processing the item. We just basically pass it to the context, who actually in turn passes it down to the generator. And we just return the collection of warnings. We add them to the actual arguments object, and then that's it. It processes them all. So let's actually see this in action. You're not going to see anything different than what I've shown in the last pattern because it really is the same kind of code, just abstracted out a bit more. So to make this work, I need to shut this guy off. So this is the last pattern we looked at. So I'm going to do a dot example. Sure I do. Let's do that. And then I'm going to unexample this guy. So let Sitecore reload. One thing I forgot to do is unconvert this from an item bucket. So we got to do that first to make sure the warning shows up. And then I got to actually fix the item name to be broken again.
So, Mike, with the whole context thing, that sort of reminds me in Sitecore development, if you're ever writing a custom condition for what was DMS and is now XDB. So if you're creating a custom condition, is that sort of the same pattern you're describing here?
Custom condition, let me think.
Because I know you have to create a context for your condition to sort of follow through, or at least that's kind of how it's all set up for you to do.
I don't know, maybe you might be able to leverage this pattern for that. I'm just like trying to think like high level, how would you do that? I don't know, maybe, not sure.
Okay. How about the the advantage to this method over the last one, where you were saying composition versus inheritance, is if you changed your base class, like if you added something new to your base class, you wouldn't necessarily have automatically broken all of your composite classes, correct?
Exactly, because there's no inheritance here. This is strictly composition. So everything needs to adhere to some kind of interface somewhere. So as long as the interface stays the same, you can change whatever you need to in the concrete classes, as long as the interface does not change. If the interface is changed, then yeah, you need to fix that. But otherwise, you can do whatever you want. And that's the benefit of it. It's all about loosely coupling your classes. That's what the pattern offers.
Yep.
However, as you can see, there are a lot more moving parts here than what we showed in the last one. Um, it's trade-off, and that's where, design patterns need to be used in a smart way. You have to really think about, what advantages will I get from using this pattern versus another. If I do the template method pattern, I can actually get things done a little faster, but I risk breaking things if anything core changes on the abstract base class. But for the strategy pattern, sure, I actually, kind of mitigate that risk by using composition, but I have to write all kinds of stuff now. If you have a framework in place, it makes it easier to add, but if you're doing it off the bat, which I don't recommend, because design patterns should not be built from, you shouldn't use them from the get-go. You definitely, need to think about things when you design it up front. And whether a design pattern will actually save you time or actually make things more complicated, because it does add complexity. So yeah, I think I answered the question, even though I went off on a million tangents. But
No, absolutely.
Sweet.
Good information.
It's a good point to point out too. When we think about ANI patterns, we think about input kludge and cut and paste programming.
right,
The idea of having to take some thought to be able to look at the puzzle and apply the solution, and the proper solution is critical with applying these patterns.
right, yeah. I mean, you can do, I don't know, thinking of the term cowboy coding, or really, I don't know if that's the right term, but really just like brute force programming, where you just go and you write stuff and you hope it just works. I think that's, I'm going to go on a limb and say that's the wrong way of doing it. You kind of need to plan your stuff before you build it. This is where TDD comes into play as well. TDD is all around, sure, it's about making your stuff testable, but really it's about class design as well. You build your test, and you're like, okay, now I got to build something to pass this test. And what it's forcing you to do is to make your stuff really testable, which means you're loosely coupling your classes. So you'll, adhere to an interface and basically delegate to something to pass the test. That's where that comes into play. Same type of thing. I'm just gonna say this. You need to have design reviews before you start building things. A design review, is also complementary to a code review, which you would have at the end of writing your stuff. But the design review is you get a bunch of developers into a room, you whiteboard stuff, you think about it collectively as a group, to make sure it makes sense. I really think those are important to have before you build anything, and then follow a TDD paradigm if you can. It's very hard. It's not easy. I've never actually done it right myself. I've tried, and it really requires a rethink of how you do your stuff and a retraining of how you code. But anyways, so here we go. We have our strategy method in place. We have the same content editor warnings we saw before. We have the same command links, except they're in a different configuration file, and I just clicked the item bucket one, because this has too many child items. I converted it back to a non-bucket, by the way. We're going to step through that. Take it a second. And look at that.
Perfect.
And, okay, I'm getting crazy IMs.
Mike is very popular amongst the community.
Just a tad.
All right, let's rename this guy to get rid of the invalid characters. And boom, no more content editor warnings. So there we go. That's a strategy.
Nice.
Very good.
All right, so factory method. People are like, what is that? Oh, factory stuff? Really? I hate factory. I mean, that means you're building something to build something. It's like, well, yeah. All right, so let's really talk about this pattern, as for what it is, in the true spirit of this particular design pattern. All right, so really you're defining an interface around creating an object or something like that, or a family of objects. You let the classes that implement your interface decide which type of object to build, as long as they adhere to an interface for the object that's defined. And like I said right here, you have to have your objects instantiate. They have to implement the same interface in order for your factory method to build it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can change things at runtime. I think actually I like this. See, I like this pattern, but the problem with it is a lot of things that have been replaced with dependency injection frameworks. However, they're kind of using that as well. But I'll show it in a Sitecore configuration flavor. But really, I mean, I'm just setting you up for thinking about how to do things in a DI way. I don't really espouse this pattern the way I exposed it here that I'm going to show you. But it's really just setting the framework up for thinking about DI patterns and doing it that way. But here's the UML for this. Nothing complicated here. We have an interface or abstract base class that defines, the contract for your particular factory method class. We have the concrete guy. So this guy defines factory method. He returns something that he builds. Concrete class, that's what he does. These are public. We're returning some kind of product. Don't think of this as like a concrete class. It's an interface, really. This product that's returned. And then we return something that we created, which is a product. So we can have multiple concrete classes for this interface. So what I did here, let's go to code. Let's look at the actual config file first. I have it open here. So I'm defining a section called factories, and then I have my object here. So this is around comparing fields on an item in Sitecore. I built it in such a way that I want to compare either date time fields or integers. What I'm doing here is I'm seeing whether, let's say a date time in one field actually happens in the future versus another. This might be useful because you might have two datetime fields, and one should be in the past, and the other one should be either in the future or definitely not before the other one. But we want to alert the user if they choose the wrong date on the one that should be in the past. Likewise, we're going to have another one for integers. So let's say you have an integer in one field, you have an integer in another. If this guy over on the left-hand side is greater than the other one, we want to let the end user know there's a problem. So this is what this whole thing is all about. So I defined something called a field comparer to pretty much check on the different fields that we care about to find a field type. So for date times, we're looking at the date time field in Sitecore. Integers, looking at the integer field, and we define our different classes to handle those. We're adding them to a list of objects inside of the actual field comparer factory. And then I'm using something called the null field comparer. So, I guess I'm going to jump ahead and say, in this particular pattern I'm showing you, I've used 3 patterns. And I'm going to call them out because really, patterns don't necessarily have to be isolated from each other. Patterns actually complement each other. So you might have something that's using one pattern and then 3 or 4 others. They just make sense sometimes. So I'll jump into that in a second. So actually, let's look at the different field comparers. So I defined an interface called field comparer. And I got a nice mouthful name here for their method that they must implement. Is field 1 less than or equal to field 2? Sorry, I couldn't think of a better name, but that's what this is doing. It takes in 2 fields and it does a comparison, right? For the date time guy, he implements that interface. And what he's doing, he's actually making sure the actual fields that are passed are not null. Let the actual developer know there's a problem. Otherwise, we parse the 2 fields at values as date time fields. Using the ISO date that's out of the box in Sitecore, converting them into actually date time objects. And then we just see if field 1's value is in the past or at the same time as field 2. It's returning that as a bool. For the integer guy, it's the exact same type of thing. We're parsing the integer value from the field 1, which is, the value in the field class is a string, so we have to do some parsing here. So we're doing some int-try parse here to make sure it actually is an integer. If it's not, we return whatever the default is. For this guy, it's a 0. Okay. We compare him if this guy is less than or equal to the other guy. That's all it's doing. And then I've also thrown in the null object pattern here as well. Because let's say we didn't, over here in config, I defined 2 different field types here in Sitecore. We have one for datetime and integer. But let's say somebody decided to do multi-list field, or I don't know, single line text field. We don't want to handle it. So we need some way to handle those types of fields. So I defined something called a null fields comparer, which is using the null object pattern, which unfortunately, I don't have a slide on this. I think in a future presentation I'm going to actually talk about this, because the presentation I'm doing here is what I think is part 1 of a series of presentations I want to cover. So I'm just like setting, I guess, a seed on this. But the null object pattern is all about handling nulls. We want to handle them in a very graceful way. So we have an object to handle nulls if they don't exist. And really it's all about not having any true behavior. So in this guy, so he takes in 2 fields and it's always returns true that everything is cool, right? That's the whole point of the null object pattern. So I define that here. And then we have our factory object. So this guy, so actually I have another pattern here that I want to talk about. We're using a singleton pattern here. Pretty much we're creating an instance of this factory guy, so he actually encapsulates this inside of himself. Using Sitecore configuration factory to create an instance of him defined from Sitecore configuration. We put it inside of a private member. It's static so that we can reuse this across all different calls to this current property. So if he doesn't exist, we lock this guy to make it thread safe. Then we actually create the instance and put it in the current private member here. Then return it. If he's set, we just return the guy. That's it. That's a singleton right there. In configuration, I'm injecting the null field comparer. So let's go back to that real quickly. Have this guy defined here. So that's to handle fields that are not defined. And then, let me go back to the factory class. We're creating a collection of different field comparers, which is in that list that's defined here in the field comparers section here. Let's go back real quickly. So we're doing that. We have a method to add these guys. So what I'm doing here is I have actually a dictionary that I'm adding to. We have to make sure the field types, is defined for either datetime, integer, or whatever the field is. If it's not defined, we get out. The type is important because we need to instantiate this guy. If he's not defined, we also just get out. We don't add it to the dictionary that's defined right here. By the way, I create this, dictionary here in the constructor so that things don't blow up. If he's defined, we have our dictionary. The key is actually the field type that we care about, and we're putting the config node in here. So what we're doing is we're actually taking this guy or this guy and putting it into a dictionary, and we're doing that so we can create this at runtime when things are called. Go back to the factory class. So there's a method here to pretty much takes in 2 different fields. We determine whether or not the fields is defined. I'm doing extra checks here. If it's not defined or if it's not in the dictionary, we return the null comparer. Otherwise, we look it up in the dictionary. If he's there, we create an instance of him here. If he's not defined, we return the null comparer. Also, if there's no definition of this guy or he does not adhere to this interface, we also return the null comparer. Otherwise, we create the instance from the configuration factory, return it. That's some methods here to do some comparisons, but I'm not going to get into that. We also have our item validator here. Here, he basically inherits from standard validator, as all validators in Sitecore inherit from, either for fields or items or whatever. We have to define a name, and this is coming from the parameters that are defined on the actual validator item in Sitecore. I also defined the two different fields here. Show that in a second. Have some constructors to do magical things. Basically, this calls the base for, which is this guy right here, to pass things to him. The real thing that we care about is the evaluate method. So basically, we grab the item. Basically, it's whatever's selected in the content editor. We determine whether the guy is valid or not. Sounds like something's falling apart down there.
That's what happens with live or non-live things. That maybe I'll keep that in.
Yes.
So if the item doesn't exist, which will never happen, or the fields aren't defined in the parameters field, we get out of here. When we say everything's valid, but really it might not be valid, but we don't want there to be any kind of warning to the content authors, because they're not going to know how to deal with this. It's a code problem. Developers need to fix their stuff. Otherwise, we grab the two different fields that are defined. If they don't exist, we also return true, because, well, we don't want content authors seeing that. Otherwise, we look at, whether or not the field values actually, conform to what we're looking for. So here, we're actually creating an instance of the field comparer. And this method is leveraging the factory singleton. So we look at the current, get the fields comparer based off of what's there defined. This could be the null object field comparer if they're not defined for these two different fields, or they don't equal to each other. That means the developer messed up, so they need to fix their stuff. And then if we have a field comparer, which we always will in this paradigm, we compare the two different fields. And, this is really an interface that defines what we're returning, or the null object one. Basically, if field 1's value is less than or equal to field 2, it returns true. Otherwise, we return false. All right, so what does that mean? I'm not going to get into the rest of this stuff. It's basically, my blog post is out there, and I recommend having a read. But I'm injecting the error message format in there. We replace two different tokens for field values. We'll show that in a second. So what does this all mean? Okay. Well, before we get into what it means, I had to define these two different item validators here. Date, time, specifying the class, name of the actual validator, basically the two different fields that we want. So we have field 1, it's looking at the date time 1 for the date validator, and then also date 2. Here's the error message format. There's some tokens in here that we're doing some real-time replacement. We have the same thing for integers. Looking at two different integer fields, and basically have a formatting message for that. So I basically, added 4 different fields onto my template here. All my templates here are using the same template. All my items are using the same template. Have date time 1, date time 2, integer 1, integer 2. So as you can see here, integer 1 is greater than integer 2, and that means we get an item validator warning here. So that's all around the error messaging being, formatted with the different tokens. So as you can see, there's a problem here, right?
Yep.
If we do, let's say, I don't know, change this to 10, that messaging should go away. See, it's gone. We have that one, and then we have other warnings, but over here, I did the same thing for dates. Here we can see date time 1 occurs in the future over date 2. If I change this guy to the, I don't know, well, no, let's go the other way. Let's do 10, and I do a save. The warning's gone. So that's all about comparing things. I mean, this pattern, is pretty much about creating things and, using them. DI frameworks kind of like replace this particular pattern the way I have it. DI frameworks really kind of like factory method patterns in a way, even though depends on how they're, created over in their side of the code, but that's the whole point of this, is about creating things and leveraging those factories and then also changing them to use, different subclasses to create these particular objects or products that we're creating. So, oops, sorry. Anyways, that's pretty much these 5 different patterns that I've showed. I strongly recommend having a look at these different books that I've laid out here. I pretty much made a boo-boo and not said what the names are here, but, this is the Gang of Four Designs Patterns book, and there's all kinds of other patterns books that I recommend here as well. Uncle Bob, or Robert C. Martin, wrote one of the Clean Code book, and it's one of these links. Definitely have a look at that one. That actually changed the way I do development when I read that book, and also Dan Soloway has said the same thing as well. It was kind of like a life changer for both of us, and I strongly recommend. I recommend reading that book before the other ones. There are lots more books I've read, and I couldn't list them here because we would have been here all day. The series of posts that I'm doing on my blog, Sitecore Junkie, are really here. This actually will give you a listing of all the blog posts I've written up to date on design patterns in Sitecore. And if you have any questions around, I probably should do this, huh? If you have any questions around anything, design patterns or anything in Sitecore, reach out to me. You can reach out to me through my blog or Twitter. Twitter's probably the best one to reach out to me, or LinkedIn as well. But sometimes it's depending. If I think you're a recruiter, I'm going to ignore you on LinkedIn. But if you need to get in touch with me, find me on Twitter. That's my handle right there. Any questions?
Nobody submitted questions for you, and we kind of asked them as we went along.
Great.
So I would highly recommend that if anybody has any questions for Mike, reach out to Mike directly. You can also reach out to us as well, and we can definitely cover those in and put them in a future segment as well, reaching out to Mike on your behalf to get those answered for you.
Awesome.
So, perfect. Jamie, did you have anything?
I do not have anything. Mike, I thought the presentation was awesome, and you didn't really leave room for any questions from me.
Yeah, it was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. And thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Thank you for being here. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Cheers.